Welcome to Wines We Drink, a podcast for wine lovers and learners. I'm Charlotte Norsworthy Varnum, and together with my counterpart Keith Herndon, we'll be exploring a new wine each week. Keith is a lover of wine, and I'm a learner of wine, and we hope you'll sip along with us. Welcome everyone to Wines We Drink, our summer podcast that is all about sharing our thoughts on wonderful wine. I'm Charlotte Varnum, and with me as always is my co-host Keith Herndon, a certified wine sommelier.
Hello, Charlotte. I'm always excited when I get to be in my wine kitchen recording an episode of our show with you. Mm-hmm. And today is extra special, right?
Why is that?
Well, we're here for our 11th episode in what we call our case of episodes. So this is our penultimate episode, the next to last in season 5.
I thought we agreed not to use that word again. I mean, after all, we have used it every season, but it is fun to say, and we know I love a fun word, penultimate.
It is a fun word, and I just couldn't resist. I know we had agreed, but what it really means for us is that the summer has flown by this year. After today, we only have one more episode this season. But I'm going to say it's hard to be sad since we've had so much fun with some simply amazing wines to talk about. I mean, just think about last week's episode. We got to drink and talk about a Chateauneuf du Pape from one of my favorite French winemakers.
Mm-hmm. Last week's wine especially was exceptionally good, and you're right, this season has been one for the history books. It is some of the best wines I have ever had the pleasure of tasting. And if you missed last week's episode or any others from this season, you have to get caught up. As well as on our previous seasons, you can find all of them on all of the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We also have an episode guide at wineswedrink.com to help you on your wine journey.
Yeah, so let's turn our attention to today's show because I get to revisit one of my all-time favorite wine trips. Last summer, my wife and I spent a week on a boat cruising the Douro River in Portugal.
Ugh.
And I'm just going to say my words will not be enough to describe how beautiful it was. It will also be impossible to recount all of the fabulous wines that we drank.
It definitely seems like a you had to be there experience, but we will get one sliver of that moment today in today's episode. Last week's Chateauneuf du Pape represented an iconic French red blend. So with today's selection, you're turning our focus to another famous European blend.
Yes, I am. I mean, Portugal has so many great wines that we could highlight. I mean, there's it's a country famous for its fresh, vibrant Vinho Verde. And it's a white wine with a bit of effervescence that certainly refreshes on a hot summer day. And of course, you can't talk about Portugal wine without mentioning port, right?
True.
The classic sweet fortified wine that for centuries has been a complement to sharp cheeses and sweet desserts. But today, we're drinking an amazing example of a red blend from the Douro made with a selection of grapes that thrive there. Before
we start talking about today's specific wine, I'd love to talk more about the Douro River as a wine region, especially because you were there and you got to be immersed in it. Your photos from the trip were amazing. And I know that was only half of what you probably saw with your own two eyes. So really incredible. And they certainly made me add this destination to my travel bucket list. This whole season's been me adding to my bucket list.
Well, you just have to get out more often, right?
Apparently. I got to get out of this wine kitchen.
Right. Well, you have to absolutely visit the Douro. I mean, much of the area is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and rightfully so. But instead of me saying it, allow me to quote from this passage from Wine Folly. I love the folks at Wine Folly, by the way. Quote, when someone says the view is epic in the Douro, it doesn't truly communicate the feeling you have when you're there. The Douro is a living relic of agricultural history dating back 2,000 years. Every corner of land along the Douro has been touched by the hands of farmers who etched out a living in a very rugged landscape, end quote.
Wow. That sounds like a magical place, truly.
Well, when you're there on a boat in the middle of the river, looking up at the very steep slopes, covered in terraced vineyards, you have to think there's some magic involved in simply harvesting the grapes. I mean, the grapes that made today's bottle were hand harvested and carried down the steep slopes in small boxes. It's just not easy to work there.
Yeah, wow. So talking specifically more about those grapes, could you tell our listeners what we're drinking today?
Well, yeah. Like I said, we had a lot to choose from. But today, the bottle is a 2021 Animus Douro. It's a blend of 40% Touriga Franca, 30% Tinta Roriz, and 30% Touriga Nacional. All classic grapes that just thrive in the Douro. Animus is a prominent label in the portfolio of the Vicente Faria wines. It was established in 2001 by its namesake. Vincent is a seventh generation winemaker. In Portugal.
That is a long family history in the wine business. But Animus seems like an odd name for a wine. So what's all that about?
That's a great question. I love this wine, and I featured it in some tastings before, and people always ask me about the name. Because, yes, in English, we define animus as hostility or ill will, but that's not the meaning here, right? There's nothing hostile about this wine. The animus label is taken from the Latin meaning, which translates to soul. And the label explains that the wine is from the heart of the Douro and will provide the, quote, sensations that will take you on a Portuguese holiday, end quote. So animus in this case meaning the heart and soul of the Douro River.
That is outstanding. So I will get to go on a Portuguese holiday today. In fact, it's a wine that claims its region's heart and soul. You really got to love it. So let's begin our sampling.
Yes, I've had this in the decanter for about 45 minutes, which gives it enough time to breathe and unwind. So I'm going to pour us a couple of glasses of this luscious red wine.
Since this wine was in the decanter, I could see it was a deep red wine, and as you're pouring it, it looked almost opaque, right? That maybe I wouldn't even be able to see my hand on the other side. There's not a lot of light passing through.
It is a dense in color wine, but don't let that fool you.
Okay. Well, I'm going in for that first smell.
Right. Yeah, I'm in there with you. This may be an unusual way to describe aromas, but I'm going with warm and delicate.
Ooh, yeah.
Okay? Let's think about fruit notes, though. What are you sensing?
Yeah. The smells coming through are red fruit, I would say. Cherry and raspberry are entirely distinguishable, very present. But I'm getting what you mean about delicate. I think that's a great way to refer to it. There's subtlety to this aroma. It's not overpowering. It's not, whacking you in the face, but it's elegant in that regard.
Yeah, we've had some wines where we've opened it up and it's like a aroma bomb.
Yeah.
Right? This one, you have to approach the glass and put your nose in there. And that's not a negative at all. This is just an elegant, more subtle approach to a wine aroma. Right?
I'll say, and I do really like that approach. Okay, so shall we go in for our first sips? I'm eager to see how this dark wine is going to taste today.
Yes, absolutely. Those red fruits are still there, aren't they?
Yes, they are. The raspberry especially. But, then you really get those dark, luscious fruits, some blackberry, black currants, even blueberry. It's a much more fruit-forward wine than I was expecting, and I really think, okay, I'm going to have another taste and kind of focus now on the finish, but that was right at the beginning of the taste, all of those fruits.
Yeah. Okay, let's have another taste here. Man. This is where my comment earlier about not letting the dense color fool you,
You're right.
Comes into play. And with such a dark color, wine drinkers may expect a heavy tannic wine, but that's not the case at all here. The finish is smooth. It's clean. Very clean.
Yeah.
No bitterness. No tannic effect there. Right.
Right. Absolutely. There's some subtle spices in the finish as well that really kind of help round the edges. Maybe some cinnamon, a light touch of pepper. but nothing crazy. And none of that's coming from oak aging though, right?
Right. You're right about that. I mean, the wine is not aged in oak. Those flavors are emerging from the tannins found in the grape skins. And the winemakers allowed that to the skins to macerate with the juice for several days before fermentation. So it's getting that really good fruit flavor coming out of the skins.
Mm-hmm. And that finish being so nice and smooth, a fruity red with some great character to it. And it's only 13% alcohol by volume. And so I think that adds to the freshness that you get from being able to sip upon it. But I do want to talk about pairing this wine with food.
At that ABV, only 13%, as you said, this makes for a nice party wine, right? I just love this wine with pizza.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to suggest a barbecue chicken pizza.
Oh, yeah. We love a barbecue chicken pizza around here.
As for a cheese, I'm going to go with Gouda, preferably a younger one, which should be mild, creamy. It'll have a somewhat sweet. I mean, sometimes even Gouda has a fudgy texture.
Yeah.
Right? The fruit flavors in that wine is going to complement that style of cheese really, really nicely.
It's interesting you mentioned that fudgy texture there because we're actually taking our tasting a bit in that direction today. We're actually not sampling any Gouda or a slice of pizza, sadly. Rather, we are pairing this Portuguese wine with Portuguese chocolate.
I know. Well, of course, a port wine we would assume, would go well with chocolate. But also a Douro red blend that is not fortified will also generally pair well with a dark chocolate, especially if the wine is like our Animus today, which is not overly tannic.
Mm-hmm. Especially because we tend to associate a dark chocolate with bringing some of that to the table too. And the fruit-forward characteristics of our wine today is going to complement the cocoa notes of that dark chocolate, but we're amping it up a little bit more. So if you recall, our wine has quite a few red fruit notes. We were talking, right from the jump, including raspberry. So we turned to a chocolate bar that's been infused with flakes of dried raspberry.
So listeners, I've had this wine several times, and I've enjoyed it with all the pairings mentioning above. But I'm going to say, this is the first time I've tried it with this chocolate. So this is a live, on-recording experiment, right? Let's give it a try, Charlotte.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So I have unwrapped this chocolate bar for us and carved off some hunks for us to enjoy. So grab a hunk and let's give it a try.
That's some dense chocolate.
Whoa. There is definitely, that strong chocolate aroma from the dark chocolate. The hints of the raspberry flakes, kind of a fruity scent as well, right? We think about the aromas of dark chocolate, especially that with the dried fruit in there. I mean, I am loving that pairing.
Well, I'm going to say it certainly doesn't disappoint. I'm not really sure what I was expecting exactly.
Right.
This is not what we normally do, It was a kind of a really interesting experiment, but it doesn't disappoint.
No, it doesn't. I mean, clearly we made the right choice by going with the chocolate infused with the raspberry there. I think that adds a little bit of tartness back into it. And really, when you take that sip of the wine, the raspberry just sings. It's delightful.
Well, you're so correct about that. It's a perfect melding of wine and chocolate. The fruit in the wine and the fruit notes embedded in the chocolate. They kind of hug each other, right?
Yeah.
It's wonderful. I understand that for many, pairing red wine and chocolate can be controversial, right? But my advice is to go for it as long as you pay attention to the tannins, right? A red wine that is very tannic would not work with today's chocolate.
Yeah.
It would overpower it and be too bitter.
I think that's right. We've talked in previous episodes about sometimes you need contrast and sometimes you need like with like. This would be bitter on bitter, okay? Yeah. And so that's not the goal there. But today's experiment, I would say, is successful because we've got the soft tannins in this wine and a very nice pairing with the darker chocolate. So a win-win for our live tasting.
I'm still eating some.
I know, delightful, delightful. So let's talk about pricing.
Well, this is by far our best value proposition of the season, right? After all, we've had some splurge wines this season, right? I mean, I'm still dreaming about our champagne from episode 6, okay?
Yes, so good.
But today's wine is not that. Would you believe the average price for this wine on the Vivino app is just $12?
What? That you're sure you didn't reverse the order there?
No. $12.
That is probably our best value. Wow.
Yeah, certainly. So, and then when you add in and account for its quality, it has a 4-star rating on the Vivino app, which listed among the top 3% of all wines in the world. It also won a gold medal and was named class champion in last year's international wine competition known as the Uncorked Rodeo.
Oh, that's fun. Oh, wow. I mean, that's so impressive. Another great selection, Keith. I'm going to have a bit more of wine and this chocolate while we take a short break. Listeners, please stay with us. We'll be right back shortly with the portion of the show we call The Finish. Keith is going to talk more about his Douro trip and his conversation with a very special sommelier. Welcome back, everyone, to Wines We Drink. This is the portion of the show we call The Finish. Today, Keith is going to share more about his fabulous trip to the Douro last summer.
Thanks, Charlotte. In each episode of this season, we have incorporated material from our book, Wine Conversations Exploring Meaning, Mystery, and Myth. The book is a compilation of 16 amazing conversations I had with a variety of industry professionals, and one of these is Silvia Cristina Cardoza. She was the sommelier in residence aboard our river cruise ship, the Douro. It's part of the fleet of the Ama Waterways Company, right? But I want to say that Christina personifies the warm hospitality that we just encountered all over Portugal. She loves Portugal. She loves the Douro, and she loves her country's wine, and I'm just going to say is a terrific ambassador for that.
Yeah, I'll say as the editor of the book, I was immediately struck by that passion she has for her work. Her enthusiasm is certainly evident in the words on the page and in the spirit behind them. And before you go any further, I want to remind everyone that if you're interested in reading her interview, you can purchase the book and read all 16 interviews on Amazon or through our local distributor Neighborhood Books. All of the purchase links are available at wineswedrink.com if you want to go check it out.
Yeah, so let's continue this part of the show by hearing Silvia Cristina Cardoza in her own words.
Blending is the rule in Portugal, so most of the wines are blends. When we talk about Douro, that is even more a reality, because in a small piece of land, like 7 acres of vine, we can have more than 20 different grapes.
Yes, you can find some wines that are 100% of a certain grape varietal. I had a wonderful all Touriga Nacional while I was there. But as she said, blending is the rule, and I think Portuguese winemakers have elevated blending to their own art form.
That was very educational for me as well. And let's be clear that blending is part of their wine process, not only for red, but also for their whites and ports.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. The concept also encompasses what Portuguese refer to as fill blends. Throughout the country, and especially in the Douro, there are old vineyards planted with just a hodgepodge of vines, right? After all, there are more than 300 varietals grown there, and more than 250 of them are indigenous varietals. The farmers who own or tend to these old vineyards often don't even have any idea what's there.
Wow.
So they just harvest them all together, crush them, and turn that blend of juice into a wine, hence the term fill blends.
You know, even with modern science that can detect a grape's DNA, they still don't know?
I just think it's not worth the expense for them to know.
Fair.
Right? What they understand is that their fill blend is delicious. You know, in last week's episode, we talked about the Naked Wines Club as a platform that Benjamin Darnaud used to build his French wine business. Well, through that club, I also found one of these amazingly good red blends from Portugal. It's from the Quevedo family, from a plot of land that they planted in 1960.
And I'm certainly looking forward to you opening a bottle of that for me soon.
Yeah, we'll do that. You know, I thought about featuring that on the podcast today, but we usually just feature one bottle. So, you know, we did the Animus Douro today, and
a great selection despite,
absolutely.
I will say.
Right. As far as opening that bottle, you know, you got it. I mean, I'm going to wrap up today's episode, though, by revisiting my interview with Sylvia Cristina Cardoza. My wife and I have commented on multiple occasions about how much she contributed to our experience on the trip. She was so gracious with her time, explaining all of our wine options at dinner each evening and setting up expectations for the wineries we were going to be visiting at each stop along the river. You know, she even gave me a lesson in how to open a vintage bottle of port using, you know, hot tongs and cold water.
Wow.
But that's a story for another time.
Okay,
you know,
fair.
Right? But I want to listen in to another clip from the interview with her talking about the subjectivity of wine.
The aromas of wine are have to do with lots of things, right? The terroir, the grapes, the oak maturation. So that's much more than poetry, but of course it's made of some poetry, right? And it's very subjective. It's very, for example, when we read a back label of a bottle, that back label was written by one person. If it was me or you, probably you would feel totally different things. If I never eat mango, it's going to be very difficult for me to identify mango in a wine. So it's very subjective. It has to do with our perception of the wine and what we feel and the emotions that wine gives us.
She makes a very good point, which I feel is often lost when we talk about wine. Not everyone likes the same thing, and we don't all approach wine from the same perspective. Even though we may present a wine on this show that we like, and it may even get a high ranking on the Vivino app, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of you out there are listening are going to like it.
Well, you know, we just have to get that point across to as many people as possible. I mean, wine is subjective. And to really understand what you like means that you have to be willing to try different things. And I just want to encourage our listeners not to be afraid to experiment, right?
And you don't even need to know how to identify what's in your glass. If you like it, that's all that matters. Take the field blend approach to your own taste buds. After all, we learned today that there are beautiful wines from excellent Portugal winemakers. They don't know what's in their bottle either. It's okay.
You know, I'm going to say well said, and that's a finish for today's episode.
Yes, it is. And this was a great episode that gets us ready for our conclusion next week. Please give our listeners a hint about what to expect as we wrap up this milestone season 5.
It is a milestone season, and I couldn't think of a better way of bringing the season to a close than with a visit to my favorite winery, the place where I experienced my wine epiphany, and you'll be with us in our conclusion as Chef Charlotte to present a pairing that's just going to elevate this big Napa Red that we're opening in our conclusion.
It seems like we are indeed going big next week. So don't expect an epiphany, listeners, but we are shooting for an excellent pairing, and that we will have. So until next week, everyone, cheers.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Wines We Drink. Listen to our other episodes anywhere you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on Instagram at The Wines We Drink, and check out our episode guides at wineswedrink.com. Cheers.